So let's get into our example for this lesson. We're going to find the radius of a cylinder, and we're going to round our answer to the nearest whole number. So when we have a problem like this, the first step that we should do is identify the parts that we are being given. So if I look at my diagram here, I see that I've got the volume is equal to 226 feet. I have this measurement of 8 feet, and I have to ask myself, well, what does this represent? This is representing the height. So I'm going to just write in that this is the height. And because we're finding the radius, the unknown then is the r. So after this, because I have the volume, and I know I have a formula for my volume, I'm going to write my formula for my volume out. So volume is equal to pi r squared times my height. My next step then is going to be substituting the values that I do know. My volume is 226, so 226 is equal to pi r squared, and my height in this case is 8. And from here, I notice that I've got pi r squared and then times 8. All of that is being multiplied to each other. So I could really just rearrange this and say 8 pi r squared is equal to 226. And just like when we learned about circles, I talked about how we can put the 8 and the pi together, because that's just a number, right? And it makes it a little bit easier to identify what our next step is to solve for this r that we're looking for. So if we're going to solve for this r, we are going to then need to divide both sides by 8 pi. So I'm going to divide this by 8 pi, and I'm going to divide this by 8 pi, and then this is going to cancel. So now I'm left with 226 over 8 pi is equal to r squared. So just like our previous examples that we talked about when we have and when we had x squared is equal to something, r squared is equal to something, if we want to solve for r, we're going to have to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to take the square root of this, and I'm going to take the square root of that. So what I'm left with then is that my radius is going to be equal to the square root of 226 over 8 pi. And I'll just put that into my calculator, and I get 2.99, and that continues. And I'm going to round my answer to the nearest whole number, so I get 3, and I need units, so 3 feet. Now, we learned that when we find the square root of something, we actually have a positive and negative value as the answer. But can you think of why we wouldn't say that the radius is equal to plus or minus 3? Okay, well, we have to remember that when we're talking about our radius, this is an actual physical measurement. So we can't have a negative radius because that wouldn't exist. So it wouldn't really make sense. So that's why when we're taking the square root in this case, we're just going to give the positive value. So take a look at your 2 and only try it questions for this video. You're going to find the radius of the cylinder, and you're going to round your answer to the nearest tenth. Remember, if you get stuck, just rewind the video and take a look at that first example. So we'll go over these in class. See you guys then.